Hello. Hello. Hello, and thank you for joining me for a demonstration of animation. My name's Ewan Green, and I'm a editor currently at a place called Atomic Cartoons, and an illustrator for Own It. And yeah, I'm going to show you some basic animation techniques and a bit about how I got into the industry. So this setup is very rudimentary. Normally during work I would use a drawing tablet and a computer, but this is where I started, and I thought this would be a good teaching tool. So without further ado, I'm going to begin. So to quick introduction and on what animation is. It's the illusion of life, and it's created by either drawings that are flashed in front of the screen at 24 per second, or by moving puppets, whether digital or real ones. Today my main thing is using drawings and 2D puppets, so this is my example. And hopefully you can make this out. It is a smiling face. I'm going to do a little story, and we're going to show timing and spacing and anticipation, which is three of the main principles of animation that brings things to life. So yeah, this is a disc from a light box, a very, very traditional, old school bit of technology. This hasn't changed really in 100 years, and it is a plastic disc with a peg bar with 3 pegs on it, and all this does is allows you to line up your drawings perfectly. That's very important, and that's really something that you need to do no matter what animation technique you're using. Things need to stay rooted, and if I was testing using this camera, I would probably be able to use a remote, and then I'd be able to test the movement perfectly. But the other technique is rolling, where you grab all the pages in turn and you just roll them back and forth to see the illusion of movement. So you can see I've done 2 key drawings. I kind of cheated by doing them ahead of time. One, she's facing screen right, and the other one she's facing screen left. And so this is the most basic form of animation. You've got one drawing here, and then she's looking to the left and she's looking back to the right. But that's really a starting point, and we can do better with an illusion of movement. So we're going to do more in-betweens. So in-betweens are drawings that go in between key drawings that are the storytelling drawings. So what I'm going to do, I have a pile of paper here. You have to get very okay with using a lot of paper in animation. So lots of recycling when you're done. One of my first jobs was working in an animation studio as a runner. That was in 2008. It was a thing called The Illusionist was the movie, and what I had to do was recycle huge bags of the most beautiful art I'd ever seen, and I was throwing them in the rubbish. And I wasn't allowed to take any, mind you, because of an NDA I signed. So that was pretty heartbreaking. So you might be able to see that my board is lifted. I'm literally using a beanbag. You can get access to this online fairly easily. It was a bit harder 10 years ago, but now they're everywhere. And honestly, you can use technology, apps, and software very accessible now. I mean, literally type in free animation software and you'll have a bunch to choose from, all of which will work pretty well. So yeah, so now I've got these two keys and I've got this one extra drawing. So there's two things we can do here. One of them is to use light shining behind it. The plastic is partially see-through. That's the idea, is to put a light behind it so you can see both drawings at once, and then I can sketch in between where I'd like it to go. So I'm at the moment doing what we call a breakdown, which is not a simple in-between, but an in-between drawing between the two key poses that adds a bit of life. So I think she's going to go from looking screen left with a bit of a gentle smile to screen right where she's really grinning. So I'm going to do an in-between, and just to add a bit of dynamism, which is a nonsense word but basically means a bit of interest for the eye. We're going to close her eyes on the breakdown and dip her head a little bit. That way it'll be less robotic, the movement will be less robotic. And instead of doing it exactly halfway between the two, I'm going to have her look a bit towards screen left than she would normally. So I've put it down, I now no longer have my light. That's okay though, because I'm going to roll my drawings and use that instead as an idea of where to go. Because flicking drawings in front of your eyes as fast as possible is animation, I get a really good sense of what it's going to look like in the end, and I can dive in with my pencil and put my drawings exactly where it looks right for the spacing. So I said before I was going to talk about timing and spacing. Timing is how long an action is going to take. So if we think about someone turning their head to notice something, maybe that takes a second, maybe two if they're slow. We're going to go for about a second. In animation, we can do up to 24 frames. I'm going to stick with 12, which still gives the illusion of movement. That's what most cartoons use. So my in-between drawing is going to be drawing number 7. Drawings are always on odd numbers. You don't need to remember this bit, but that's because in the old days it was captured on film, and you would do 2 exposures for each drawing, so you'd always wound up on an odd number again. So this one's going to be 1. You can also do K for key. That helps you remember and plan ahead. And this one we decided a second, so I'm going to make this frame 13. And this is also a key. So for those of you who are quick at maths, the in-between drawing of 1 and 13 is going to be I hope it's this one. My maths is absolutely terrible, which makes me a pretty bad animator. I think it's 7, right? 1, 3, 5, 7, 9, 11, 13. Yeah. So this one's going to be a breakdown, which some people illustrate by underlining. So we've got key on 13, breakdown on 7, and number 1 is my other key. Okay. So while I'm sketching away, I'll talk about a bit about where I came from. So I currently live in Vancouver, British Columbia, but I'm from Scotland originally, and I studied at Edinburgh College of Art. Huge point of privilege, I was studied there for free. In Scotland we have free secondary and tertiary education tuition. I got a small student loan to pay for my living costs because I was lucky enough to be able to move out. So yeah, I lived in Edinburgh. I got lucky enough to go on exchange to Canada, and ended up meeting my partner, and we sort of globetrotted a little bit. We both used our youth mobility visas to visit each other, and then when we graduated, unfortunately the recession hit. I'm just noticing when I flick through right there that her hair doesn't dip while her head does, so I'm gonna add that in, I think. So I'm just, you can be fairly rough. Something I should say as well, this is what we call a rough stage. Later on I'll go in and clean things up, maybe even on a separate bit of paper to see. But for now, yeah. Something animators do, which is pretty useful, just to remember, is to put a center line down the front of their face. It can get you in trouble, because human faces don't really have a center line, but we're gonna do a quick one just to remind myself that I intended to delay the turn so she's not exactly square in the middle. So her nose is going to be off center, her eyes are going to be off center. I also said I wanted to make them closed, so do that. Her mouth is also going to be off center. So yeah, it is 2010 and we've both used both of our mobility visas. Adrian's living in Scotland now, and we're lucky enough to work on a feature film called T.O.M. And it turned into a bit of a nightmare for us. It was, the French company didn't pay our company, and we were living off of morsels that were coming through pretty slowly. And a lot of our friends weren't being paid at all, and the company ended up going under. That was a pretty tricky time. That's looking okay. In the end, what we did, because we were kind of facing never seeing each other again, and we're both incredibly stubborn, and quite lucky, and one of the privileges which kind of stacked, because I was able to get free education, I had a degree which meant that I could consider teaching in South Korea, and the only requirement for that is a degree in any subject at all. So Adrian and I discovered you could get a couple's visa to go study in Korea. So we did that, and luck upon luck, we ended up in a really beautiful place called Jeju-do, about halfway between Korea and Japan. So I just noticed her eyes are a bit high up there. If she's looking down, we should be able to see more of her forehead. Which is going to bring her eyes and her eyebrows down a little bit. So as well as making sure that things move okay, you can kind of get by flicking things. Everything should move in an arc. Generally, if you were to slow any movement down, things don't move in straight lines. They make arcs of progress across space. So if I was to draw a line of the arc of her nose, say, I might start here and end here, and then I would make a curve like this. It wouldn't be straight across in any case, and it's good when you're making in-between drawings to make sure that you're making a curve and not making a beeline to the next key. It just looks wrong. I think even if a robot were to move, if it was an android, it would move in curves too. It's just kind of how nature's set up. So yeah, the other things are these points, say the nose or the tip of the ear. Everything has to move in a curve. This is sort of something you can do in the second pass. But the other thing that's important is if you've got lines, say like the line on her neck, there's one here, and then that same line is over here. So if I'm doing a breakdown, I want it to not do this, because when I play it back, when I roll the paper, it'll flicker all over the place. I need it to move in a consistent way, so I'm going to pick a decent halfway point between these two. You don't exactly have to make it a perfect in between, because that's not very natural, but it needs to not make this shape when it's changing. So I'm going to, between this one and this one, I'm going to put it here. Same thing with the other side of her neck. One is here, the other is here, so I'm going to put this here. So now you've got this sort of, it looks like I've just scribbled all over the paper, so I'm just going to, for clarity, finish this line. Okay, it's looking a bit better. So as I'm rolling this, I'm looking for things that might make a mistake. One thing I noticed is her nose is kind of vanished. You can do little marks to keep track of pieces, and that's okay. You don't have to fully render it each time, but I think the reason I'm feeling the nose has vanished is because it's in the wrong place. I think if she's looking to the left, it would be a bit more over to the side. So I'm gonna just move it a bit over. That, to me, looks much better. So now I'm just sort of fine-tuning. I want the part of her skull that would be visible around the eye socket is a good place to have like a hard line that contrasts soft shapes like her cheek. So I've got one here and I've got one here. So it's missing in my breakdown, so I'm just going to add it here. Because we're looking down, it will be shorter, and her brow will be kind of bigger compared to the other two. Okay, there's a bit of a problem. Her cheek is disappearing, so I'm going to bring it out a little bit. Bring it in on the other side a bit. It's funny how I'm not drawing a real person, but you can almost see where there's a mistake from how they move. I think humans are designed to see, or rather we've evolved to see faces really well. We're really used to it. It can be a hindrance sometimes because what we're not used to is representing those faces in 2 dimensions. So you don't always trust everything your eye tells you looks wrong. Because our other instinct that works against us is our habit of flattening things out, making it static and inert, and that's pretty much the opposite of what we want to do in animation. We want to give things life, and for that you're sort of always sort of working against the instinct your head has to make everything boring and level and flat. So yeah, we're now in Korea, and it's lovely. I'm coming to realize I really love teaching. I had a chance to do some guest lecturing in animation before I left, And this is English, but it's not all that different at all. And I'm really enjoying it. And in my spare time, I'm animating in the evenings. I ended up making a short, and we explored the island, but we were both not quite where we wanted to be. All of our friends, all of our loved ones were elsewhere. Okay, I think that's working out as a rough drawing. Her eyes could maybe use some work, but maybe that's something I can tighten up later. So, we've got a breakdown and our two keys. So, spacing is if timing is how long something takes in animation, and we're going to say this takes a second, spacing is how you get there. If you've got a drawing of a ball here and the end point is here, if the spacing is even, if the in-between is here, the in-between is here, the in-between is here, until you fill up all the spaces, what you've got is a even robotic movement back and forth. But if you take the end point here and the end point here, if you put the spacing close to the beginning and then further away and then even more space and then less space and less space again, suddenly you've got acceleration and deceleration. And all I've done, the timing is the same number of drawings, they both take a second, but this drawing is closer to this drawing, and this drawing is, each one of these is spaced evenly apart. So we want to do use this in here to show a story. So something that we use all the time, we think about all the time in animation, is the theory of mind, which is a philosophical principle whereby your brain basically makes a simulation to understand other brains. And that seems really complicated, but it's basically just comes down to empathy. It's our empathy machine, and we get it very early. If you show kids a little video of a square and a circle moving together in the same direction, and you ask what's happening to the kids, they'll say the square is chasing the circle, or the circle is playing with the square, or something like that. They'll put their own meanings into it. So like the human brain is on the animator side in this, which is really handy. But there's little tricks you can do to show intent. And one thing that humans do is they tend to rush into things and then control things at the last minute. So with the spacing on this one, we're going to ease out, which is to say we're going to start fast. If her head is this ball shape, and this is the frame 1 and this is frame 13, we've got the middle one, 7. We're going to end up slowing down. So the first one's going to be fast and the last one's going to be slow. So we're going to put these close together at the end and less close, and then out here, and then we're going to put these quite far apart. So even, and then it controls the landing towards the end. So the drawings are going to get closer together as it gets to the finishing point. Okay, so the timing is a second. The spacing is what we call an ease out, or controlling the landing kind of thing. So we're going to do a halfway in between now, between 7 and 13. So I'm actually going to just take off 1 because we're not worried about that right now. So Adrian and I are in Korea, and it is 2013, and we decide to try and go back to Canada because we lived in Scotland before. And Adrian hasn't seen her family in a long time. It just seems like Adrian's turn. And they do have an animation industry there, so there's a chance that we can do what we did our degrees in, which is, I think, most people who take an animation degree hope to do it. They can't always. So yeah, we head out. It turns out into a bit of a nightmare. We're told that it's going to take 3 years to get a family visa. And the lawyer basically, we're very lucky again, it was $500 to see her, and she said, "You're going to need it," and just sent us out of the room. And it was pretty bleak, because I couldn't work, and I didn't want to never see Adrian for 3 years, so we did a crazy thing where she worked and paid the bills, and I did a sort of crazy freelance thing. You weren't allowed to work in Canada or even take work within Canada from Canadians or even volunteer, so I ended up, my only option was to take international work, and my only avenue for doing this was through the internet, and it is not a very friendly avenue to hunt for work in. So yeah, that was a miserable, weird time. And I honestly don't, like, what really, really saved me during that time was a random tweet that I sent in, I think it was 2015, I'm gonna say, to someone I listened to on a special edition of Front Row, I believe, or and it was this person who came on and said, like, hey, the future is diverse and it's integrated media, it's going to be animation and books and music all combined, and we do not need to be afraid of technology, it is empowering. And it was Crystal. And through that tweet, Crystal reached out and said, hey, we might need an animator. But yeah, I was able to just take a month and a half and create something that I am still proud of to this day, the book Don't Be Alien. It took a year and a half, not quite 3 years, but way, way longer than I ever thought we could have managed. Towards the end, we were completely out of our meager savings we'd gotten in Korea, and the coming back on the plane, because I had to leave every 6 months because I was there on a tourist visa, had gotten more and more suspicious. We were getting, I was getting taken aside and asked who was going to financially look after me, and just in time, PR came through, and then 3 months later, after a lot of tests and a lot of trying, I ended up getting work as a builds artist on a Disney show called The Legend of the Three Caballeros, which was just magic. I met some of my favorite people. I'm still working with them to this day. So yeah, that brings me on to kind of what else I wanted to talk about, which is, if you're interested in animation, how to get work in it. It is a very different world, and it's kind of changing all the time. All the gatekeepers are kind of gone, but that's not to say that anyone can get in, and there's still a lot of things you can do to help. The main one really is persistence and practice. The degree has never helped me get a job, but it helped me, it gave me space to learn. I did get mine for free. Having 4 years to focus on learning is a huge privilege. It's maybe the biggest thing that I've been given. What it ended up doing though was like allowing me to travel and get life experience, and that's helped me a great deal. So, but in terms of actually getting hired, people are way more interested in your drawing ability. So practice is the number one most important thing. So I'm doing my in-between, and this is a true in-between, which is to say the lines are just kind of moving from one to the other. I'm still trying to maintain this curve, and I've been fiddling with it a lot because I think I've not done a great job of keeping the volumes intact. I think her head grows a little bit, so I'm going to use an eraser. This is not cheating. There's one of the wonderful things about animation, and something I really only learned after I graduated, was the first pass is going to be not great. Don't worry about it. Don't feel defeated. Just move on to the next pass. Move straight on. Don't miss a beat. Animation is so much about correcting things. In my first in-betweening job in Dundee, the one that went out of business, I would do a drawing, I'd take it down to my supervisor, and she would say, this is wrong, 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 and I would write it all in the margins, like ear is skewed, and then blah blah blah, and I'd have the whole margins filled with them, and I'd bring it back to my desk and I'd fix the drawing, and I'd bring it back, and she'd send me away with another bunch of stuff, and we'd repeat just forever. Okay, I'm getting a bit lost. The face is very blank, so I'm going to do my map again. That's about the middle, I think. This is her left eye here, and this is her left eye there. I'm not going to do it exactly in the middle because that would look weird, but this gives me a rough idea, and then I'm going to get it by flicking it. I think I've actually leaned into this side much more. This is supposed to be an in-between, so I'm going to put it further to this angle, and I need to remember it's doing an upward swoop, so instead of putting it up here, I'm going to give it a bit of a dip. Okay. That looks sort of okay. Now, eye direction is super important. You need to be careful when you're designing eyes that they are looking consistently the right direction. One of the first ever lectures I went to on animation was by Chris Landreth. He's a CG guy, and CG people, since you're using a digital puppet, sometimes it can be tempting not to move the eyes around all that much. They're small on the screen and hard to see, but they are vital because the humans go right for the eye. So if you're not sure what they're looking at, like in this one, she's looking up and to her left. So I need to keep that consistent. So even if her face is pitched down, she's got to be looking up to in the same direction. I also notice I've put the highlight on her screen right. We'll often do screen direction instead of, so her left eye is her screen right eye. I need to make sure that her highlight stays in the right place, because that looks pretty bonkers too if the sun is moving around. Just make sure her nose is dipping down. So I've just noticed her nose is doing the thing I don't want it to. If I was to draw a line through this one, it would be pretty level. And if I was drawing a line through the end point, it would also be pretty level. And in the middle, I've gone and made it like this. So it's going to be doing that wild flipping around. I don't want it to do, so I'm going to fix that. Bring it up. I'm actually going to erase it. Don't want to get mixed up. Where'd my eraser go? Oh well. I'll just do a quick reminder. Okay. If that works a little better. Oh, there it is. Hello. Thank you to anyone shouting at their screen where it was. Okay. Okay. I think that flickers much less. So I'm going to favor, in terms of drawing shape, things can stay the same for consistency, or you can vary things to make things more dynamic. For her mouth, I'm going to favor this shape over the closed mouth. So, just gonna have a look. So she's got these dimples on both sides, and she's got, okay, so her mouth goes down and then over the top, and she's still looking down a little bit, so it's a little bit closer to her nose than before, and then down and then back up again. Okay, you can see all of her upper lip, makes a nice grin, and because her head is already in perspective, we're going to see more of this side of her mouth than the other one. Her bottom lip starts here. You can see all of her teeth. Teeth are hard because literally, and because it's really easy to overdraw them. Okay, I'm happy with that. So I can still tweak anything afterwards, but okay, let's do her screen left eye. So we'll do it again. This is the one eye, that's her other one, so in between, and I'm going to favor this side, so I'm going to do it here. Okay, got to be careful, as with the nose, not to do this nonsense again. So it's level here, and it's also pretty level there, so I'm going to make sure it starts off pretty level. And she's looking up. Okay, if the bottom of her eye is to be consistent, when she's looking down, it's making a sort of very tight curve, and when she's looking all the way up, it's fairly level. So I want to respect that and do a halfway point. So I'm gonna just do a bit of more of a curve. So that was the turning point, really. Like half a year after that, I got my PR, and 3 months of applying for jobs later, and I'd just gotten a job, or the confirmation that I was getting a job at a late night coffee shop in downtown Vancouver, night shift. And when it came through that I was accepted, and I just cried and shared my happy news with a stranger sitting next to me in the coffee shop where I was sitting. I tried for a few places, and getting into the animation industry for me has been a lot of luck. And to anyone who's feeling disheartened, I have never passed an animation test. I've taken 8. And it has never once led me to a job, although every single time I learned something from it. In the end, I got lucky. I was interviewed and said the right thing that they needed to hear, which was the opposite of what people will tell you need to say. I said, I don't know what this is, but I am so keen to learn. And the person who was hiring me was up to their high dough with people pretending that they knew what they were doing, and they were prepared to teach. They just wanted someone willing to learn. So I got really lucky. I found the right person at the right time after a lot of trying, and that's kind of the best advice I can give someone. Is the best thing you can do is give yourself more chances to succeed. In the end, all the things that are holding you back and all the things that are in your favor, you're not in control of. Give yourself as many chances as you can. Don't feel downhearted. You deserve to be there. You deserve to be given your chance, so keep trying. To date, I have never been asked about my degree in animation. But having it allowed me to go to Korea. It gave me some time to think about why I wanted to be an artist, and that definitely helped me keep me going when things were really tough. Okay, so blinks, the eyes don't stay closed the whole time, so I need to open them up. I hope you can see it coming together a little bit. Ooh, now I'm looking at her forehead. It's doing something pretty wild. It's squishing and then getting bigger again. Oh dear. So this line here and is kind of this line here. So that's a little better. Her hairline is doing funky things too. It's here and oh dear, okay, so still wildly wrong. So the great thing about our brains is we can see mistakes. Not all the time that you can make out a solution to the mistake, but that you can at least try again. That's what I love about traditional animation. You can just roll it and see where it goes. Okay. Let's see. So we can see screen left eyebrow here, screen left eyebrow here. So it should be about here. So you'll notice I'm being a little bit more mechanical with this in between. Oh dear, no. Then the breakdown. But I'm still trying to keep in mind a curve. So everything is going to be moving like this, never like this. And now, because I've got the rough place I want the eyebrow to be, now I'm looking at each of these lines in turn. This line to this line is going to be doing this. This line to this line is going to be doing this. Okay. So after I started working at Atomic, at my current place, I was still carrying a lot of anxiety from the times I was not doing so well, and that reflected in my work. I would challenge my supervisor whenever he'd say I was making a mistake or there was a revision needing done, which is an odd thing to do, and like it's hard to imagine at the time, but he confronted me about it, and it turned out that I didn't want to make a mistake because I didn't want to be let go, because it meant so much to me that I was working. And he said that is totally against everything that he wants and everything that I should be here to do. I need to be able to make mistakes in order to improve, and I need to be able to take his advice if we're going to work together. And I took his point completely, and got a big hug and cried a bit. Thank you, Sam Alkaitis. And I'm still sort of getting over all of that. It is very hard when you've had it tough to get over that period. But just if anyone is going into that, and I'm anywhere nearby, I get it. And a lot of people empathize with that, especially in animation, and they'll support you even more if you can ask for help. Okay, so we've got an in-between. We'll call this one, do you remember? This one's number 9. So now we've got the makings of a story. We've got a beginning and an end, and a breakdown. So we've got the story of a girl who turns to the right and smiles. We were talking about the theory of mind earlier. You can use that in very interesting ways. Remember my example of the kids who thought that the circle was chasing the square? If you put in space to think, then people will imbue that with meaning, and they'll use context to figure out the meaning. And sometimes if there's no context, they'll straight up make up stuff. And I love that. So I'm hoping that whoever watches this is wondering why she's smiling. Because it's a fun exercise, and it's nice to see someone smile, and it's fun to think of why they might be happy. Something to show thought in animation is in the eyes, and I was saying earlier about the eyes being important. There was a director called Chris Landreth who gave a lecture in 2005 while I was in high school, and it was about the uncanny valley. It was there was a movie called Polar Express which was pretty terrifying to watch because it had these awkward puppets with dead eyes, and it was Tom Hanks. It was a Christmas movie, and it should have been delightful, but it was horrifying, and it was because of the eyes. It's because the eyes didn't act. They stared out of the screen at nothing in the direction that the character was facing, and humans are good at spotting stuff like that. So we're going to show intent by changing by moving the eyes by themselves. So all we're going to do, and I hope this is enough to create a story just by itself, is to move her eyes to the right before she turns. That's all we're going to do. So just really quick, I'm going to trace through the original key, because I don't want to move anything else. So anyone who wants to get into animation, there are places all over the world. A lot of the old gatekeepers are gone. There's nothing stopping you, if you are great at what you do, to apply for a job, and there are a lot of places that will work remotely. Especially things like Netflix, a lot of productions on there. If you can draw it, you can just do it. They'll get you that contract, whether you live, no matter where on earth you are. I love that. That's so exciting. Early people who took advantage of this are amazing artists. Please check him out. He's called the Sean Thomas, and he was a storyboarder, an animator from America, and he knew that historically animation wasn't done in America, which is the odd thing to say considering like Disney and it's people associate it with animation, but they didn't do much of it in America, at least not for the last 30, maybe even longer years, especially in television. It would be shipped abroad to Korea. And that didn't sit well with him. Apart from anything else, he wanted to animate. So when he got into a position where he could, he asked if he could go to Korea and learn how to do it. And he went there, and his whole story is online. It's in a thing called Soul Sessions on Vimeo. Please, Seoul, like Seoul, in South Korea. It's an amazing story. Please check him out. But anyway, he learned Korean and had adventures and went to Japan and made lots of friends. And now he and a group of international friends from Israel and France and all over make stuff themselves. They use studios sometimes, but they're borderless, and that just makes me so happy. Okay, so got our key. This is called animating within a pose, because we're just going to adjust it slightly, and she's going to look over to her right. So human eyes are spheres, ultimately. There's a lot of skin and flesh that goes over them, but this is what they look like to begin with. And when you're looking to one side, the iris and pupil squish. So if you're looking dead at someone, then they're pretty circular, even if they're cut off by your eyelids. The pupil will be circular. But if you're looking in one or other direction, it can squish and become more of an oblong. So we've got to keep this in mind when we're drawing eyes that change direction. We're looking 3/4 screen left, so we want to do this one was oblong, and now we're going to make it more circular. The other thing we need to consider is if you're going to add a highlight from a light source, always put it in the same place. So you can draw that if you're trying to keep track of it for shadows and stuff. Animators sometimes draw a little cone, as if there's a torch. The circular one's a good one. It makes a nice shape. It echoes the pupil. So I'm going to use that. On this side, because we're looking the other way, it's going to be squished. So, but the highlight's going to be the same. Okay, that's it. So we've got a story now. I think a whole story. She looks over there. She hears something, looks in that direction, and turns with a big smile. I'm surrounded by just the most amazing people, and I feel so grateful to be asked to be part of Ownit's wonderful festival, and I'm going to share a bunch of resources so you can have a go at animation yourself using any technology you have to hand. You can use any digital device or paper or plasticine or anything. It is very accessible now, I promise. And yeah, thank you so much. Please email me or tweet me any more questions you have. I love you all. Thank you.